Thank you very much, Ludwig, for the kind introduction, and welcome to you all for a short exploration of what is the status and what are the labeling requirements for biotics being used in animal feed in the European Union. And we talk about biotics in a number of, we talk about probiotics, we talk about parabiotics, we talk about prebiotics, and I understand that you have seen this picture here a few weeks ago, where probiotics are, let's say, at the center. They are the living organisms that have good effects in humans and in animals. Then they, of course, require nutrients, which are the prebiotics. And then you have derived products, I will call them later, the postbiotics, the parabiotics, however they are defined. We will see that. Now, when I am asked to discuss the legal status of a product in the European Union, I'm first interested, do we really have legally valid definitions? And there is a not very well known database about European Union terminology. And when you look into that, you find the terms probiotic, you find prebiotics. It's quiet about para and postbiotics. But the term probiotics and prebiotics, they are not introduced as legal definitions. Reference is made to a guidance from WHO, FAO, which I think is well known, and to a scientific paper about prebiotics. But we do not have reference here to legal definitions, which gives us maybe already a first indication where the journey is going to. Now, are they regulated at all, probiotics, prebiotics in the European Union? And you will see it is a bit difficult. Now, we have a number of areas, business or regulatory areas where probiotics, prebiotics could be relevant. One is the area of veterinary health. And in fact, this is one of the few occasions where the term probiotic is used in legislation. In organic production of food, of animal-derived food, we do have a sentence saying that in case of organic production, authorized probiotics may be used instead of veterinary treatment in animals. However, it's not really stated anywhere what are authorized probiotics. And these may be nationally authorized products. In the area of veterinary health, probiotics, prebiotics are usually mentioned frequently, you could say, even in the area of One Health, antimicrobial resistance, antibiotic use in animals, in food production, where you always have the statement, well, this promising probiotics, prebiotics, they will reduce antibiotics, they will reduce antimicrobial resistance. But it's a political declaration. It's not a recognition of the legal status. Likewise, in human pharmaceuticals, probiotics are at a European Union level not really defined. There is one orphan drug that is stated to contain probiotics for the treatment of babies with enterocolitis, but otherwise we do not find too much. It is different in the area of human food, where we have more than 20 years of discussion, you could say, about probiotics, and not necessarily most favorable discussion you may envisage. Probiotics were used as a term early on when I started to work in this environment. Probiotics were really fashionable products already more than 25 years ago. However, when the European Union started to regulate information on food, regulate claims and so on, in the preparatory work, it was already agreed by the Scientific Committee for Food, which is a precursor of EFSA, that probiotics should effectively be considered like health claims and should only be allowed if substantial scientific evidence is around. And the member states agree to that as well. And as an effect, when the health claims were evaluated by EFSA, more than 159 health claims for prebiotics and probiotics were submitted in 2007, but during the years, all of them were rejected. We do not have, therefore, an authorization to use the term prebiotic or probiotic on food products. That, of course, you can imagine, is not very satisfactory to industry. They started a discussion with EFSA in 2019, and EFSA pointed to Brussels, to the regulators. And now there is an initiative since a few months whether probiotics should not be introduced again as a legal category, separate from the question whether there are scientifically backed health claims around. And that discussion is gaining momentum, but we don't know where it's going to go to. We will see that. And in animal feed, you will ask, well, it's also a strange situation, because probiotics is used frequently in the discussion as a term referred to, there are probiotics or even prebiotics. However, we do not have in the legislative environment any legal category. So as a conclusion of this review, we can say we do not have one-to-one definitions for probiotics or prebiotics in the area of animal feed or in the food legislation. We do have an interesting discussion in the One Health environment. However, there is no obvious one-to-one legal box where I could say this is where probiotics fit in. So if there are no obvious boxes, what are then the available boxes we have in feed legislation where we could put probiotics or prebiotics inside? And let's first look into these obviously available boxes. The first one is feed additives, and feed additives are substances used for a specific purpose, being technological, nutritional, sensory, or zootechnical. Example given, a gut flora stabilizer. And in the legislation for feed additives, it's stated that microorganisms which are alive are always feed additives. And being a process for authorization, we do have a positive list approach. So only those substances and microorganisms which have been evaluated and authorized are allowed to be used as feed additives. The second large category are the feed materials, which are typically the sources of macronutrients, the commodities containing such macronutrients. Commodities, I mean, like corn or soybeans, or the derivatives, so soybean oil, those are feed materials. And also the fractions of such commodities or of starting materials that contain macronutrients, they are usually considered to be feed materials, among them glucomannan, inulin, yeast cell walls. And with respect to microorganisms, only dead microorganisms could be feed materials. Live, please remember. We have two inventories of feed materials. One is the feed material catalogue, and the other is the feed material register. The feed material catalogue is officially adopted by the Commission. It's a recommendation for products, how they shall be labeled and their composition. If a product is not in that feed material catalogue, it still can be legally acceptable as a feed material. In that case, you are asked, you are advised, you are encouraged to notify it to the feed material register. And then you may happily use it. We have further boxes, which are the premixtures. The premixtures consist of feed additives and feed materials and do not have too much own legal independent status. And then, of course, the last box is compound feed, which means feed that contains feed additives and feed materials and is the product that is really fed to animals. And this can be complete feed, providing the whole ratio, or it can be complementary feed. And that is here the area also where it becomes interested with respect to claims and labeling. So we do have these boxes. And now, of course, comes the question, what does that mean for probiotics, prebiotics? Let's first go to the probiotics. which are, as we know, live microorganisms, which are always feed additives. And they are evaluated for a purpose. And as you will see in a second, the main purpose is gut flora stabilizer, and that is what you are allowed to say to label on the product itself. And likewise, if you add this live microorganism as a feed additive to a premixture, for premixtures, it's allowed to speak about the constituents and their properties, nothing else in principle. So the premixture or the live microorganism, the feed additive, is added to complete feed, which contains feed additives and feed materials. And here you have to first state, of course, does contain the gut flora stabilizer, but you may also talk about further good effects, health benefits that comes from the feed. And there you could talk about the probiotic benefits that this feed will provide to the animal. Now, you remember we said live microorganisms are feed additives. There is a positive list. So we can look into the positive list, which is the register of feed additives available from the Commission's web page for those microorganisms that are authorized for pets. And there are number one, mainly gut flora stabilizers, and those are yeasts or bacteria. You could say typical ones, also quite popular on the human side for probiotic effects. And let's have an example for such a probiotic. This one here is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And now you note, contrary to the previous slide, that there is a number with it, because this authorization here, the example is for Saccharomyces cerevisiae strain number so-and-so, which is authorized to L'Allemand or their associated company Dunstar. And this may be used in horses, so you are not permitted to use other strains in horses unless they have also been authorized. So this authorization runs until 2030 and provides you with the possibility to use it in complete feed for horses or complementary feed, depending on what you anticipate in your market strategy. Prebiotics in animal feed. Well, you may remember that we talked about prebiotics being nutrients for the microbiome, for the probiotics. So they typically will be feed materials. Nowadays we can say that feed material does serve the organism, which is the animal itself plus the microbiome. So the borders are here not that clear and distinct maybe, but if you take the example of inulin, a typical prebiotic being a feed material, as it is not a feed additive, it's not authorized, it's just listed, and you can on the label of this feed material already talk about the prebiotic benefits that you have. And in the complete feed, it is very similar. You add inulin into a complementary feed for dogs, let's say, and then you can talk about how good this will be for the digestion by the animal, whatever you want. You can do claims as you like them, as you want them, however, with two conditions. The first one is they need to be true and documented. And the second one is you should not tap into the veterinary products area, which is quite important, but we will not discuss it here today. Veterinary products, they prevent disease. You use them to treat disease, to prevent disease, and you have to be careful in your wording not to suddenly turn your product into a veterinary product. Important with respect to the statements is that this does not only apply to the label, this applies to all information around the product, the feed material or the complete feed. This includes the web page content that and your glossy brochures, etc. Now, if we look into the examples of prebiotics as being feed materials, we do have here a number of them. As we do not have a clear definition, what is a prebiotic? I looked into Wikipedia webpage from this year, and there you find an inventory of typical feed material, typical prebiotics, and as you see, most of them are listed as feed materials, so you can easily use them in complete feed. Some of them are not listed explicitly in feed material and in feed material catalog, but in the feed material register. So you safely can say that most of the typical prebiotics are feed materials and may be used accordingly in animal feed. Let's have an example or two examples. One is from the feed material catalog. This is our yeast products, which is a rather broad category. All yeast parts obtained from Saccharomyces cerevisiae and a number of other microorganisms. This is a growing list, you could say, over the years, and as substrates, lots of different products can be used. At the end, it covers almost all typically industrially relevant biomasses and the parts of them. And what parts? Well, here you have the example of premium yeast cell wall produced from Saccharomyces cerevisiae. This product, distributed by L'Allemand under the brand Agremos, definitely falls into that category and is a feed material. Below you have an example of beta-glucan, which is not listed in this catalog. However, it is listed in the feed material register. Somebody notified it in 2012. In that case here, from a non-genetically modified Aspergillus niger. And as it was notified 2012, you can safely assume that this is not really challenged by anybody, because entries that are wrong or misleading, they are removed by initiative of the sector or of the member states' control authorities. So we can conclude that prebiotics are safe ingredients that fall usually in the category of feed materials. Now we are left with the para or postbiotics, and you saw this scheme here a few weeks ago, and Mr. Sandfold had a definition of parabiotic being more the, let's say, major parts of cells or the whole cells, and postbiotics being rather smaller components like vitamins, amino acids, bacteriocins, stuff like that. Now, this is one approach for the definition. I noted that we do have another one, which is coming from a consensus paper of scientists that have gathered together to address this. And their postbiotic definition is a bit broader and could be read as if they only consider postbiotic to be a term, not parabiotic. Now, this may be an evolving discussion, I'm not sure about that, but for the use in animal feed, I can put postbiotics and parabiotics together in a kind of working definition, which allows me to categorize the corresponding products. This working definition is para or postbiotics are derived from living or dead microorganisms and confer health benefits. You could make a bracket, they are not live microorganisms, of course. And from these microorganisms, a wide range of products is in the marketplace and can be imagined. The biomasses containing specific active ingredients, cell walls, lactic acid, protein fraction of a biomass, the yeast part, we know already one, and polyhydroxybutyrate, so specifically defined polymers. And based on the purpose or function of such a product, I can say it is a feed material or it is a feed additive. I have here examples: biomass containing organic selenium, That's a trace mineral, source for a trace mineral, and is a feed additive. And likewise, a biomass containing astaxanthin is a feed additive. And lactic acid, feed grade, is derived from a microorganism, but it is itself a feed additive, so it's regulated as under this legislation. Other products typically are rather feed material, like this yeast part that contains nucleic acids or provides nucleic acids, nucleotides, which are not feed additives themselves, so they are categorized as feed materials. Now, when you have a product, how do you do that? There is help around. The Commission in 2011, 10 years ago, provided a kind of guidance or recommendation how to classify substances, whether they are feed materials or feed additives. And this depends on how they are manufactured, how they are used, what's their functionality. And with that, and with the help of, for example, given this FEFANA classification tool, FEFANA is the industry association in Brussels, dealing with feed additives and some part of the feed materials, you end up with the substance being feed material or feed additive. And it's either, it's not being feed additive and feed material. A substance cannot be at the same time feed material and feed additive. So you come up with a decision and conclusion about your material. We talk about labelings, so this includes claims. Now for probiotics, the situation is in that sense a bit simple because they are evaluated and authorized, then they can be used. So EFSA has looked into the efficacy and has described the efficacy, and whatever EFSA has stated and what is repeated in the authorization of the product, you can refer to in the labeling and information about the product. In addition, as far as gut flora stabilizers are concerned, there is a general permission to claim them to stabilize the physiological digestion that was recently introduced into legislation, in a legislation which is abbreviated as PARNUT, particular nutritional purposes. Now, complementary feed or complete feed with probiotics can of course also be labeled to have positive effects. You can make statements about it as long as this is scientifically robust and well documented. And that well documentation, I would say, should also be possible if you have feedback from the field, from the market, from the consumer, from the user, how good a product is for the animals and their health, as long as this is properly documented, because whenever you do claims, you need to document them. And how do you document them? There is again help around here, because claims for biotics fall under labeling, and for labeling we do have guidance from industry. This guidance from industry is semi-official or para-official, you could say, because they were developed by industry associations, these guidance documents, and they were blessed by the European Commission and the member states, who investigated it critically and provided their feedback. And these documents are referred to in the official legislation. So you can do claims, and in a nutshell, you can do them if they are scientifically valid documented. And that documentation, on request, you have to hand over to the competent authority responsible for your business or looking after your business. Let's come to the end. Summary and conclusions about the status of the products, and this means also about the labeling of the products. We do have probiotics, prebiotics, and then the derived products, postbiotics. And the probiotics are live microorganisms, feed additives, safety efficacy evaluated by EFSA. Claims in principle no. On feed, yes, if scientifically well documented. Prebiotics, which are feed materials, microbiome nutrients mainly. Safety and efficacy is the responsibility of the manufacturer, supplier, or of the user, of both. so feed business operators, and you can do claims if they are scientifically well documented and supported. And for the parabiotics, postbiotics, the derived products, it depends whether they are feed material or feed additive. Feed materials, the same as for prebiotics. Feed additive, the same as for probiotics, applies. And I think with this overview, I can already start to thank you for your attention. However, I would like to emphasize that some of the views I have shared here with you are my interpretation, and that according to European Union legislation, feed business operators have to verify whether the positioning and labeling and claims they do for their products are sufficiently backed and meeting the European Union regulatory situation. Thank you very much, and I look forward to an interesting discussion, Ludovic.